Hi, I'm Matthew Vadum here on behalf of Tina Trent to talk about her article, The Southern Poverty Law Center's Trump Effect Deception. On November 29, 2016, the Southern Poverty Law Center and other so-called civil rights groups met at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., and called on President-elect Donald Trump to immediately and forcefully publicly denounce racism and bigotry, and to call on Americans to stop all acts of hate. But what acts of hate were they talking about? The hate that they invented. Let me explain. The SPLC released the results of a survey answered by more than 10,000 teachers across the country, detailing the negative effect the election has had on school climates, a phenomenon dubbed the Trump effect. The center has long claimed that the nation is boiling over with hatred and intolerance. Decades after the civil rights movement forever changed America, and despite the enactment of the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and the imposition of affirmative action, American race relations are always worse today than in the days of Jim Crow. The SPLC claims that its survey is evidence of a tidal wave of hate speech, vandalism, and threats directed at minority school children by their peers who support Trump. Every social ill, from bullying to poor grades to tummy aches to suicidal thoughts, may now be attributed to the Trump effect. Much like witchcraft, Trump is supposedly such a powerful influence that he induces nausea and crying fits in grade schoolers and among teachers. In a triumph of psychological projection, even beating the snot out of Trump supporters is now Donald Trump's fault, because the Trump effect infects everyone with aggression, regardless of the content of their character or their politics. And even preschoolers have politics now. A portion of the Trump Effect report is dedicated to complaints by preschool teachers that the toddlers in their care are engaging in uncivil discourse because of Donald Trump. Here are 3 typical responses submitted by teachers. A lot of our students from historically marginalized identities, e.g. Muslim, people of color, and LGBTQ plus identified folks, are truly scared for their lives if Trump were elected. The call for return to slavery, indentured servitude, by some has been astounding, but has not seemed to shock my students. Heightened distinction between ethnic groups with stereotyping and discrimination. We just studied the Holocaust, so it's refreshing to see the comparisons students are making between Donald Trump and Hitler. What? It's crude propaganda, but that's par for the course. The Southern Poverty Law Center is an attack machine funded by far-left philanthropies and individual donors who want to move America dramatically to the left. Anyone who doesn't subscribe to the center's hyper-politically correct views is deemed racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, or Islamophobic. The SPLC accused the American Enterprise Institute, the influential mainstream conservative think tank, of links to racism just because it employed conservative intellectual and filmmaker Dinesh D'Souza. AEI is part of an array of right-wing foundations and think tanks that support efforts to make bigoted and discredited ideas respectable, the center stated. But the center was unable to come up with real examples of bigotry or racism. Instead, the center called legitimate lines of intellectual inquiry bigoted and dishonestly misrepresented AEI's views. D'Souza, who rails against affirmative action and racial preference policies, is a dark-skinned immigrant to the U.S. from India who speaks with an accent. But to the center, he is a scholar whose views are seen by many as bigoted or even racist. Notice the use of weasel words here. Instead of presenting actual facts, the SPLC says D'Souza is seen by many. The group claims the principal enemies of the American people are people like Donald Trump. The center characterizes all opposition to immigration and open borders as symptomatic of hate, and all political expression of those views to be hate speech. In other words, if you disagree with this group, you are evil and worthy of public condemnation. It may take some intellectual toughness to insist that the nation has the right to decide who may or may not cross its borders, but it's not hate. Donald Trump wants to restrict immigration, deport illegal aliens, and enforce the law, so in the center's eyes, he is a hate-monger. The fabulously wealthy 501c3 nonprofit has an astounding $1/3 billion, or $338 million, in assets, as well as bank accounts in offshore tax havens, Bermuda, and the Cayman Islands. If the SPLC is involved in something, chances are it's a scam. With the SPLC, the point isn't to actually disavow prejudice, but to monetize it. It's media gold whenever Trump reiterates for the umpteenth time his forceful disavowal of racism. Media outlets from MSNBC to NPR then take to the airwaves to disavow Trump's disavowal, and another entire news cycle becomes about speaking truth to power regarding Trump's supposedly persistent racism problem. The mainstream media eagerly picks up these specious allegations and reports them as news. Thus do unsubstantiated rumors become documented incidents become official reports, and official reports become a purported tidal wave of hate blared in headlines across the nation. What about the real tidal wave of slurs, threats, riots, property damage, and beatings carried out by anti-Trump activists? Silence. There's big money in claiming our schools are awash with 9-year-old white supremacists and neo-Nazis. And government education funding is the only money the SPLC can still skim off taxpayers these days. If you liked this video, please click the links on your right to read the full story on our website, and subscribe to us on YouTube, and check out the description below to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Thanks for watching.